Welcome back, everybody. I know it's been a while. This is actually video 500 for the channel, as a wonderful friend just let me know. So welcome. Thanks for being here on the journey. I've just got a case of Hunted for channel friend Andreas, Mr. Grimm. So I'm gonna get through this for him and have a quick chat. No face cam today. I'm trying to be more like Rudy. But yes, one case of Hunted for Andreas. And speaking of Rudy, wanted to chat about, I don't usually compare MTG and Fab, but there's something going on, I think, that's worth talking about, that's maybe makes the two a bit comparable. I'm not familiar with many other card games, so perhaps this is comparable to other card games at the moment too. Let's try and remember how these packs are set out before I get completely sidetracked on talking. Is it back 3? I'll do one more. The Majestic threw me off. So back 5. Okay. Where was I? I don't know what to title this video actually, but maybe we'll come up with a title right now. It's about more or less, and by the way, let me preface, I don't have a financial mind, I don't have a financial background, so there's probably terms and very obvious things I'm going to talk about, obvious to you who might have a better financial background, so comment below if I'm misspeaking or stating something somewhat obvious. But I'm trying to maybe make a point today is why there's this lack of growth in high-end, I'm going to use the word vintage loosely, but vintage Magic and Fab, and why these newer sets like Final Fantasy recently for Magic and like Hunted and High Seas for Fab are complete and utter financial successes, and there's bullish tendencies on the prices and the singles, etc. And why I think it's a bit strange when people find that confusing or can't understand why. So how do I summarize that? Well, yeah, but why is high-end dead or slow? Here we go. While like the new sets are doing very well for these games. Well, why I think they are anyway. So I'm also speaking a little bit anecdotally here, but like let's talk about Flesh and Blood since I'm somewhat of a voice on that. It seems like the prices for everything from foil, commons, and rares from the first 3 sets to, you know, sealed boxes, legendaries, fables, cold foils from those first 3 sets are very much stagnant, if not like retracting in value. I think a cold foil tunic currently is about 3.5 to 4.5 thousand USD, depending on who you talk to. And that is the lowest it's ever been, really, as far as I've been in the game. Doesn't mean I haven't bought them for less, but that's usually because they're part of a collection, or, you know, the person was, here we go, nice legendary. This is a fire box so far. But, you know, those peaked at, when I say peaked, like in recent memory, I'm not talking about 2020, 2021. In recent memory, we've sold them for 6,000 US. Like since opening the shop 2 years ago, we've had sales for 6.5 USD. And there's like this group or movement in card games that tend to value the old higher and treat it like a commodity maybe, and expect that the older and rarer something is, the more of a safe bet it is to put money into. I find that's like a similar thing that crypto people like to talk about is, hodling is for some reason seen as the penultimate high intelligence, low risk way of making money with holding on to these like what would you call, like how would you compare collectibles and crypto? Like tertiary assets, volatile assets, new world assets. And I have this theory, and I have these thoughts when I hear like people like Rudy or any collector that hits me up going, hey, price up my collection for me, and it's mainly alpha, and then we send them a price, and they're like, oh, has it really dropped that much? Or I think I'll hold on to it. And I'm like, in my mind, I don't say this to people, but in my mind, I'm like, I don't know if holding on to it means the value go up. It isn't currently going up. Hasn't been going up for a while. And I think it's because for some reason, people get it in their mind that like a card game is somewhat like, let's say gold, where it's a finite supply, potentially, and with cards, what's there is there, and what's printed is printed. They can't go back and reprint a 1990s Magic card. Even if they do, it's still going to have a different date on it, and they can't reprint, alpha, flesh and blood. So inherently, there's some demand that will slowly wither away at the supply of that product, since it's a finite supply, and therefore the pricing will go up. What I'm starting to learn and feel, and maybe again I'm completely wrong, but what I'm starting to notice, and the similarities to crypto conversations, is it's always the same people. It's always the people that think that way are also the ones holding those heavy bags, or got lucky early and they have a bunch of alpha and expect that. And not only that, it's just the people that are involved in it that have that opinion. While on the flip side, you talk to the average player, they really don't have a strong opinion about whether old stuff, vintage stuff goes up or down. It doesn't. And I'm going to ramble a lot this video, but I have like a whole bunch of random thoughts that I thought were cool anyway, and I wanted to maybe try and get them out in a video. One was, I think there's a more finite amount of money in this collectibles than people would like to admit. And what I mean by that is comparing why would someone buy cases of high seas versus, a box of Arcane First Edition or Alpha First Edition, or why isn't, what I'm saying is I think the two are related. I think the more you see success in the new sets, the less likely it is to see success in the old ones, because I do think it's just a finite amount of money that goes around. Even with the game growing, or any game or any economy growing, if it's not growing faster than inflation and the worth of what a dollar will buy you in a card game, people are still faced with a choice, and it's not necessarily, oh, that's a nice hit. The choice isn't always as binary as do I buy old set or new set? It's that these people have X amount of money to spend on collectibles anyway, and slowly it's more attractive to buy the new set. And I think there's a very obvious reason psychologically why most people, not everyone, but most people would prefer to buy something new than something old, especially if you're comparing a sealed box of a new set to a card from an old set. Like, for instance, buying a case of High Seas for whatever the current price is, 800 Australian dollars, instead of paying $800 and buying yourself maybe, I mean, you wouldn't get like a Cold Fall Storm Striders, but for the sake of the example, maybe there's a Cold Fall Storm Striders for $800 you could buy instead. And I think it's gambling. I think it's part of the draw, which is, I think, what a lot of these comments videos, wherever I've heard this messaging, saying like it doesn't make sense why people would buy something that's new versus, or again, why the new stuff is going up or selling better and the old stuff has been stagnant for a long time, is they're forgetting that a big part of the pleasure of collecting and even playing card games is the variance, is that not everything is set in stone, it's random. Which is funny because as far as I can tell, when you talk and consume this content or commentary, most of these people that have those opinions about vintage old stuff are very much the people that hold that old set in high regard because they had a experience of variance that was positive. I'm one of them, for example. I'll speak in more plain English. Like, I opened a Shiana cold foil in the first crew box I ever opened. I think it was even the first pack or two. That was a big catalyst for me getting into Flesh and Blood. I risked some money to have some fun opening cards, and it paid off. And it wasn't necessarily just because it paid off money-wise, it was just the experience of hitting something so rare and getting the dopamine hit from that happening. Which, by the way, if I had just bought a Shiana, I wouldn't be devoid of that feeling. Buying something cool and expensive and rare can obviously provide you with pleasure, but it's not the same. It's not even close. And I'm not saying what's better and what's not. I just think card games tend to appeal to people that do want, at some level, the rush of opening something cool in a pack. And that could be all the way simplified down to opening something cool in a draft pack that like helps you win, to actually hitting the lottery one of one James White signed card, you know? And I think what a lot of people discount, who, let's call them investors or people that consider themselves investors in card games, they which is, you know, whole tangent. Is that a second quiver in the same case? It is. Cold foil. I think they discount the human element to this, that it's not just a spreadsheet and numbers, and, you know, something that's a 1 of 400 should automatically be worth more than something that is a 1 of 800, right? And I think it's because people, there's many reasons I could think of, but I do think people are flocking towards newer products in games, and even paying above market and scalping and all the crazy stuff you see on the internet if you follow it. It's because the old stuff, that economy has been, it's toxic. Like, the people holding on to it, you know, there's people hoarding vast amounts of it, which artificially drives the price up. When I say artificially, I mean some of them do it on purpose. Obviously, the price goes up when the supply is diminished, usually with products in general, if there's demand. But I feel like it's no better. Well, let me take that back. I'm sure it feels better to open a cold foil heart than it is to open a rainbow foil, you know, Wool of Arcana, right? I'm sure it feels better. There's reasons for that, but the end, like if you had to compare the cost or the risk in doing one or the other, most people would just lean towards focusing on things they can afford within their means that are actually possible versus, chasing that grail. And I think that's a big reason why, that content, for instance, doesn't watch well anymore. Like I did a Alpha Arcane box break, and I think it barely hit 1,000 views. I don't really view count on this channel, but I could care less. I still do this primarily for fun, but like compared to a High Seas box break, which hit 5,000 or 6,000 views pretty easily prior to launch week. And that's because I'm trying to recollect my thought here, but people don't even watch it because they're not even aspiring to that anymore, potentially. That it's not even like I don't think the dream of the average Flesh and Blood collector is to get their hands on an alpha box anymore and crack it. I'm sure that exists. I'm sure people do. Maybe I'm speaking with a bit of privilege here, but I think that's diminishing across the collectible world, where people aren't like, oh, I wish I could get my hands on a Pokemon box from the 90s. And I don't think that's dead. I think it's diminishing. And I don't think that because something is old and rare, it's necessarily going to increase in value over time in collectibles. No more than the new stuff will. Like on a percentage basis. I think if you had $20,000 worth of High Seas locked in a closet and $20,000 worth of Alpha locked in a closet, I would argue, my guess is that the High Seas will outperform because you were there for it, It's the nostalgia effect of these older sets are frozen in time for a lot of people. I think this goes around, I think it affects, this is the last box, by the way, Andreas. I think the nostalgia effect is limited to how many people it affects and an age group that it affects and like a socioeconomic background it affects. And I think that's a very small part. And I don't think any amount of hype, like even LSS putting in these alpha cards back into a set out of James's collection for people to open, is nearly enough to like revert us back to 5 years ago where alpha was new and you missed out and you're kind of trying to relive the glory days, or maybe buy something that you couldn't afford then that you can suddenly afford now. I think that's I don't think that's real. I don't think it's as big as people would like it to be. I don't think people are much more likely to enjoy something new with more supply, better hit rates, and on top of that, it's something that they can physically play with and has a more liquid market versus, high-end collectible stuff, old cold foils, that the market is so insanely saturated by the people that are already in it and the people that hold vast amounts of it and didn't let other people in, meaning, if you spent a year or two buying alpha boxes and putting them away hoping to make a lot of money, you have turned off a whole bunch of collectors that would have loved to buy some but weren't going to pay those prices that you were willing to pay to put into as an investment and keep. And I think over time that's caused people to just not care about vintage Magic, not care about older Flesh and Blood sets. And again, I'm talking generalistically. Obviously, a lot of people still care. Obviously, some of you watching this will be like, John, no, I wish I could get my hands on an alpha box. It's like the dream. I know. I'm saying I think it's diminished a lot. And I think we're in a new era. I think the new era is second shelter for the case. Yeah, the new era is more predictable. You know, if a new set comes out and it's got collectability and playability, it's just going to do well, and it's going to be a fun thing for more people, or the majority of people, to open, draft, collect, whatever, without the pressure of like it being a $5,000 purchase that, you know, they maybe can't afford to open and lose money on just for that hope of a dopamine hit. I know I'm rambling. I know why I sleeve that. But it's just, again, I have a few videos here and there watching like Pokemon scalpers and watching the price of high seas, for instance, just get like out of hand for a bit. And people wondering like about the intelligence of the people paying it. And I just think it's more attainable. I think it's a sign of the times. It's people may be a bit fatigued from everything good being expensive when it comes to collecting, and focusing instead on current, more accessible things. You complain about high seas pricing, and I know the US had some supply issues, maybe not the only place that had supply issues, but it's still much easier to buy a high seas box, for instance, than an alpha box. And when things are too hard, it doesn't just automatically make them more desirable because they're too hard. I think there's a diminishing returns on lack of supply or supply being too highly priced or achievable. Anyway, that's my rant for video 500. I think you did all right. Not the best with legendaries, just the one quick dodge. But I think the 2 non-fall shelters not bad. Nothing crazy though. No EA shelter, no EA anything except the rare, which from memory maybe only comes in EA. I'm trying to remember now. Recap is the 2 shelters, 6 Rainbowfall Majestics, 1 Rainbowfall Legendary, 2 Enchanted Quivers. Don't know why in Coldfall, but that did happen. Andreas, thanks as always. You've supported us Andreas is one of the supporters turned good friend that I hope I run into more often when I get to European events. But if you're here and you're new, please subscribe. There'll be a couple more videos. Hopefully I'll record one as soon as I turn the camera off here, but come say hi. I'll be in Australian Nationals, Auckland and Singapore are the next 3 events, and otherwise next year, see what they announce. Thanks for watching and catch you guys soon.